a bit. The gain pan the hard little bit.
It's better.
Talk again.
Better. Or
No
still
man, you
too
can
loud.
go back up more, look up more. Take
Good.
off too much. Yeah.
All right. Two, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Fire away. You're saying.
Yes, I would give thanks to life, you know. Blessed night.
Serious. Serious thing. We are here again, Bald Head and the Dread on the live version with a special show this evening. We give thanks for everyone tuned in, everyone who's gonna tune in. We have an all-star cast of powerful women here.
Definite.
I'm pretty sure you'll definitely learn something. Uh, we have Keisha McDonald, Paula Hurlock, Char Curry, and Carol Miller as our guests today. I'm actually looking forward to the reason to hear what they have to say. So we're gonna get right into it, right? And anyone who feels they want to start, feel free to do so. First question I want to ask is, do you believe? All right, before I ask the question, I do have to put some context to this, right? Um, I believe everyone in our current day society struggles with accountability, but because of the conversation is focused on women, and we have you women here, we wanted to focus on women. I just want to put that out there, right? Because I know the brothers struggle with accountability too, but for this conversation, we'll be talking about women. And the question is, do you believe women struggle with accountability, and if so, why? Anyone who wants to take it first, you know?
One of my things that I believe is that fact that as women, when we were little girls, we were coddled. We were, it's like, oh, okay, well, she bumps her knee, then, we got to go and pick her up. But on the flip side of that, as a little boy, like you guys are told to suck it up, get up, stop crying. So I feel like there's that. But then I also feel like society nowadays pits women against men or pits women so that they think they're over men. So what happens is you have this thing of women thinking that in some ways that they're better than men, and so that's my opinion on it though.
Um, Anyone else want to chime in?
Yes, I'll chime in. I think what we're experiencing right now is a situation where we're having like we're in the cross currents of different cultures and cultural expectations. You know, the damsel in distress, the ladies before gentlemen, the helpless female versus in our culture where we're from in Africa, you know, there were roles assigned and people just fell in. So now we have a situation where, especially so in North America, where people feel as if, or women feel as if they have to catch up on being treated very, very well to overcompensation almost for the poor treatment they've had in the past, and they're trying to make up for it now. You have to treat me well, and so on. So I think that's kind of what's happening right now, or we're in a transition between those cultures.
Entitlement.
Well,
Yes,
thank
kind of.
you. Thank you for inviting me to be a part of these amazing ladies' discussion. And I think what Paula said is a perfect introduction, as it were, to my thoughts on the matter. And I must preface my comments. I know that the title is about women, but much of my commentary is going to be directed at Black women, women of African ancestry. So I just want to make that clear. And for me, nature does not allow women to avoid accountability. The very act of sex brings severe consequences on the female. The act of interacting with a man has consequences for your body, for your economic situation, for your future, for your purpose. So the fact that Black women are able to try to sidestep their accountability in their reality is just an indication of the fact that they're living in a delusional reality, a fake social construct that's created by white supremacy, created by white male chauvinism and Abrahamic religions, where they think that their life is somehow controlled by someone outside of themselves or something outside of themselves. And once you are operating under that narrative, then it just sets the stage for you not to understand your power and to take accountability for your actions and your inactions.
Carol, did you want to touch on the topic?
Not hearing Carol.
I can't hear her.
You're muted.
Oh, she's not muted now. No, it's
All right. I think that's it.
Oh, all right, all right. So, I want to delve deeper in this accountability topic in regards to relationships now, right? Specifically, constructive criticism, and I have to put context to this again due to the conversation. All people, well, not all people, majority of people seem to struggle with constructive criticism. But for the point of this conversation, to edify the sisters that struggle with that, do you believe women struggle with constructive criticism more than men? If so, why? And also, what advice would you give to someone? I'm not talking about verbal abuse. I'm not talking about shaming. I'm talking about constructive criticism that will lead to improved behaviors. Um, what advice would you give to a young sister who does struggle with constructive criticism? But the first part of the question is, do you think women struggle with constructive criticism? Um, Paula, you want to go?
Okay, I'll go ahead. Women are just by their very nature very sensitive. So I think we do struggle with any kind of criticism, whether it's constructive or not. We're just going to get hurt. Different cultures, just because of their different cultural normalizations, are going to respond differently. Okay, so I find that North American women are, I find they're hypersensitive, right? Caribbean women are a little thicker skinned, right? I don't know enough about like African women and how they are, right? But I know overall women don't like to be criticized. Already they have all sorts of fragilities around how they look, how they're perceived, what their men think of them. Remember, we're also suffering from insecurities around infidelity. And so everything is going to make them feel insecure. And that's a part of how society has structured it so that we are perpetually insecure, self doubting, and sometimes some of us are even angry. You know, there's always the proverbial angry black woman. So there are lots of stressors on us. You know, we have lots of responsibilities. We have the children, we have homemaking, we now have jobs. So when we get criticized in one area, even if it's constructive, we just, most people, you know, do have issues. Of course, they're going to be the thick skinned ones who are okay. They're like, what? Criticism, whatever, and moving straight along. So it's a little, you know, it's subjective, I think. But for the most part, women in general, especially Black women, we don't really want any kind of criticism, constructive or not.
Char?
I don't know if okay. Can you guys hear me now? Okay. So in my opinion, I feel like it depends on not only the caliber of woman, but also the emotional state in which she's already in. Because so many times you know, we're looking to level up and get past certain things that we went through in the past. So that way we can elevate and be better, right? But so many times it's like we don't like to hear certain things in certain tones, but it's like if you want to grow and you want to do better and you want to move forward being better, then you have to have those moments where you have people around you that actually speak into your life. Because if not, like even as far as like the outsider looking in, some people can see things in you that you can't see in yourself. So it's imperative to have people around you that aren't yes men.
McDonald.
Sorry, my mic was muted. Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I don't know that women in particular have a difficulty with constructive criticism. I think there is a very peculiar state of mind of people, all peoples, whether it's black men, black women, the proletariat, whatever so-called oppressed class that you fall into. I think there is a challenge when the goals or the roles are not clearly defined. So let's just look at, for example, a job. If you are working at an institution and your roles aren't clearly defined, on the one hand, they're telling you that you're supposed to be the receptionist. On the other hand, they're telling you, oh, by the way, you're supposed to be the doorman. Oh, you're also the janitor. Oh, you're the security guard. And there is no cultural context to guide you as to exactly what your role should be. And I think this applies across the board. There is this feeling of a continued removal or moving of the goalpost. So you will hear in popular conversations where black women are saying, are we expected to be submissive, or are we expected to be the provider? Are we expected to be a submissive provider? Right? Because on the one hand, black women are being told, you should be okay with building up a brother, paying the bills, and accepting of him just being able to contribute. On the other hand, we're being told, come now, you're too feisty. You have too many opinions. Well, sir, I pay the mortgage. So it's a continuous moving of roles. There is not enough guidance. There is not enough community. We don't have enough input from our elders, and we don't have the guidance of our original cultural container, that is Africa. So therein lies the confusion. And I believe what we're seeing is not a resentment of criticism, but a frustration of who exactly am I and what am I expected to be.
And you brought up a great point before we move on. I just wanted to add something to it, to what you said. I think one of the issues is that because we're not in a stable environment, the responsibilities are evolving and changing. And I think we need to do a better job of being open to what's needed to get things done at that time and place, because we're not in a stable culture. We're not in our own society, and our place in society is constantly moving because we don't run the society. So I think that's one of the main reasons why our roles change so much.
Yes.
I think we have to be more open to just doing what's needed to thrive in the environment. And unfortunately for us, it is changing a lot, and we have to do a better job of identifying, accepting, and executing the roles that's needed at that time.
I agree. I agree with that. And Char mentioned it where she was making the point that it depends on the level that the person is at. Like, for example, people that are on the path, the spiritual path, they are open and receptive to criticism, constructive criticism, guidance, mentorship, and so on. But then there are lots of other women who are just going from day to day. They're in survival mode, and they're just so busy trying to survive that they don't even realize that they can seek mentorship, which is what Keisha is saying, that the structure, or societal structure, which was one that was, you had grandmothers and elders and matriarchs that would be able to guide you, that doesn't exist, especially in the US and in the Caribbean where we're um, from, you know. So I think it's valid in that respect.
Is anyone here open to sharing how they got to the point where they were able to receive construct? I want to be clear. I'm not talking about abuse, right? We're not talking about abuse. We're not talking about people talking crazy. We're talking about actual constructive criticism. Like, when did you get to the point where you were able to receive constructive criticism and apply the advice that was given?
Before we go into one, I believe Fofie has sent a message in the chat regarding the mic issues.
Okay. Yeah. Can that be resolved? Because just now, I think your mic is open now, Fofie. Can you try now? Uh,
Oh, was anybody open to sharing their experience in regards to getting to the point where they were able to receive constructive criticism?
Yes, and for myself, I would say that the more I chose to look back in childhood, into childhood traumas and adolescent traumas and traumas that I experienced, and actually deal with those things emotionally, that is when I was more open to it. Because before, I always felt attacked. I always felt like I was being criticized. I always felt like, people were against me. But in fact, it was due to the fact that I had this lens of trauma and drama on, and I couldn't receive the wisdom and the not and the nuggets of knowledge that was coming through, because I was so traumatized and so stuck in my headspace of still operating as a little girl instead of a woman.
yeah, I think that's very common. Um, it's the same thing for me. I would always feel attacked rather than being supported. And so when you get to the level of awareness where you realize that sometimes what is being said to you is not a personal attack, but someone helping you to be the best version of yourself, then things change. So it has a lot to do with the person and how far they are along on their path, right? Another issue that I wanted to raise is something that I've seen play out among women. Um, for example, you have a group of women, and I know this might be a little bit of a diversion, but I wanted to bring it up. Some women are open to hearing about, for example, inadequacies in a relationship and how they're being treated by a man, told to them by a sister, a friend, a group of friends. But other women don't want to hear and will, in fact, stop speaking to their friends if they're being offered advice. So I think it's kind of in the same category. I've seen both situations play out where, for example, a man is having a relationship or he's cheating, and the girlfriends know, and the girlfriends, tell their friend, and their friends either get angry and stop speaking to them, or shut down, rather than be receptive and say, okay, so what evidence do you have, and then be open to hearing the truth, and then taking an action based on the truth and the reality of the situation. So even though it's a little bit of a digression, it's the same thing. It's the way we react. It's the level of, um, you know, regulation that a person has to be able to deal with the information and not feel as if they're being attacked by their jealous girlfriends or so,
Quick statement on that. Be have a question will come to my mind. Someone that really want to ask is like, I think overall, from an objective level, there is like a strained relationship that I see between men and women, especially when it comes to the internet in particular. Like there's no reasoning where really take place and say, all right, there's that balance. Okay, I understand this whole perspective and we keep the conversation moving. It's more like a lot of people sharing personals, a lot of women. So for example, we talk about women sharing personal stories of what's happening in their life, and then it's always everybody thinking, okay, let's put men over here and let's put the women over here, and nobody meet in the middle. So we really want to get your take on how important do you think it is for men and women to have a conversation and take things from one level and bring it to the next level, so it can evolve, as opposed to seeing each other as enemies, so to speak. And do you think social media have any role for playing at that too?
In my opinion, oh, were you asking someone in particular? Sorry.
No,
Go
man, just
ahead,
straight it
Charmin.
up.
So in my opinion, I don't feel like we're against one another. I feel like so many times that's what society puts out there. That's what society wants us to believe. And those of us that don't go along with the ways of society and know how to think for ourselves, we don't believe that. And we don't sway along the same ways of that.
Um, I see what you're saying about the conflict. I see so much conflict, especially on social media. In fact, I think exactly the opposite. Social media is the biggest contributor to this kind of head-butting between the males and the females. So, for example, you'll have the women saying, well, if I'm going out on a date, he has to carry me to a five-star restaurant and he has to dress this way and he has to be wearing designer stuff. I don't want to talk to him if he's wearing no brand. And then there's the men that say, well, yeah, I'll be dropping money in her cash app and or whatever. And it's a very sort of toxic scenario being played out on social media, right? I don't know what it's like in real life because all I'm getting to see is the toxicity being played out on social media, and I don't see uh, them coming together and meeting each other in the middle, where a woman is going to say, well, if he is polite, well spoken, and very, seems like a nice guy, I would go out on a date with him and it wouldn't have to be a five-star restaurant. I don't see that coming together in the middle. It's this is it. And it's kind of a little bit of a delusion where everybody wants to have a celebrity, guy in their DMs chasing them, you know? I don't know.
Well, I want to respond with 2 points. Firstly, in regards to meeting in the middle, I think it's a Western sociological, psychological myth that we have to always strive for equality. And that's kind of ruining a lot of our relationships, romantic and otherwise. Equity is not the same as equality. And for those of us who've been in long-term relationships or marriages, understand that many times, the seesaw goes up and down. This idea of meeting in the middle is not necessarily, in my view, something we should strive for.
Yes.
But secondly, I think I'm leaning to agreeing with Char. I believe what has been dubbed the gender war is in many ways a distraction and is absolutely not true. And I have to also think of it in terms of what we want, the bigger picture, in terms of freedom and the revolution that we see happening for African people of African descent. And we have to consider that the idea of dialectics is always at play. Through confusion is how we extract clarity. We need to be always aware that hatred is not the opposite of love. It's indifference. The minute we stop engaging, stop talking to each other, that's when we should worry. I, for one, I'm hopeful when I see these back and forth conversations, because what that tells me, as someone who studies our history, studies our struggle, capitalism is being questioned every day. White supremacy is being questioned every day. Religion is being questioned every day. And all that we're seeing being played out is men and women debating and trying to find their way, their true identity in a system which they have rightly identified as no longer being beneficial to them. So it's no different than what was happening in the 60s, where people were questioning capitalism, people were questioning Christianity. That's what's happening now. It's just that it's playing out in a different type of conversation because we understand, contrary to what they'd like us to believe, we understand instinctively as African people the importance of family, the importance of community. And so, who am I going to complain to? The black man. Who is the black man going to complain about? Me. And so I see it as a positive thing. I don't believe there is a real gender war. I believe it's an opportunity for us, as Paula said, who might be on a spiritual journey, to guide the conversation, to guide the information, and to utilize it as an opportunity for us to elevate as men and women.
Yes. I agree. And really quick, just to add something to that, I also teach on the fact that it's not about whether we're against each other, whether there's a war, but also you have to understand that you are the one that's in control of what you're following. So if you're following certain content, then that's continuously coming at you, right? That content is continuously coming at you. So it's going to get into your psyche unbeknownst to you, and you are going to start to believe certain things. So it's about also what you follow.
Right. I agree with that. I think and I love that both of you touched on different aspects of what's happening today. The part that I'm very concerned about is the decay, moral decay. Back in the 70s and the 60s, people fell in love with each other. They would see a girl in the class and he would just say, yes, I'm going to make that woman my wife. And invariably, he was able to pursue that beautiful young woman, and then they'd get married, and 40 years later, they would be able to tell the story. Now we have a situation where a guy sees a girl, he shows that he's interested, and she's telling him, well, you need to cash at me before we can even have a conversation. Um, and it now becomes a transaction rather than an opportunity for two people to get to know each other. And that's the only thing that I'm observing that I never observed 25 years ago when I was, a young woman. Can you imagine me, being looked at by a guy and telling him, listen, my bank account is down by NCB, put in $10,000 in there and then we can have a conversation. But that's what's happening today. And it's almost become normalized where men know that they have to pay. In Jamaica, there was this song, if a man wants him, have to pay down on it. That was a song. It was
Nick
a
Julie.
joke. It was a joke. Yes, it was a joke. But now it's been normalized. So that's kind of what I'm also observing that I never observed 25 years ago.
Yeah, and even to add on to that, thank you for saying that, Paula. And even to add on to that, it's like they want to date men's pockets and wallets instead of actually getting to know them. And we have to stop this. It's ridiculous. It's absurd. But this is the thing. When you watch reality TV, when you listen to certain music and you follow along certain things, this is the way it comes out in your behavior and the way you think that people are supposed to be with you, and it's unacceptable. How are you going to date a man's pockets and his wallet, and you don't even know if he has good character? You don't even know if he has integrity. But you, come on, come on.
It
I come.
is.
I mean, I don't agree. I don't agree that it's necessarily a new phenomenon. I think the idea of trading romance and love for companionship or marriage, I believe that is what's new. You can go back into any Eastern civilization, and marriage always came with some kind of, what they call it, dowry. The man had to present something, and in some cases, the woman too. You have to present something physical and tangible in order to establish yourself as a suitable life partner. So it could be goats, it could be cows, it could be land, but this idea of as another popular song, Paula, when it comes to love, I'm all right, but financially I don't have anything. That is a very new and recent phenomenon. So whilst I sympathize with the notion of we ought not to let our interactions become transactional, I believe there's a way to honor the original traditions of marriage and family and community without this underbelly of prostitution. But we have a tendency of wanting to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Men should absolutely, the birds do it. The birds bring twigs and things when they want to mate. It's not, it has been perverted, and we have seen a degeneration into what it has become. But the underlying principle is sound.
I just wanted, it's two things McDonald said, right? For this part here, I don't think the context, the example you gave applies, because when you gave the example of a man bringing something, the context was marriage in regards to long-term relationship. But I don't think the context now is for long-term relationship. I think it's a transactional relationship, a short-term relationship fueled by, I don't know, they call it like clout, or, just more fun experience, but not necessarily building a family and building a community. And I think that's where the problem lies. Like what the example you provided, I take it with, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I take it was for like a long-term relationship, like building a family and staying together for a duration of time. And I think that's the issue with this environment. Someone said it earlier. I was helping.
Well, here's the thing. We have to be careful of not trying to have things both ways, if that makes sense. So on the one hand, we have a generation of men, young men, that are not being socialized to date for marriage. So if the men are not being socialized to date for marriage, they're being socialized to date for sex. We put women at a disadvantage when we say, don't negotiate in terms of something tangible, because the men, you should only want something tangible when you're being offered marriage. But that is not being offered. So what do you have remaining? Is it that you're suggesting, which I might agree with, is it that you're suggesting that women should opt out of dating, opt out of casual dating? Or should we re-socialize young people that we only date for marriage? What about the ancient concept of having suitors? That's also a real thing, where several men come and they bring their offering, and the woman judges it. No, but it's a reality. The woman judges his
Actually,
suitability.
I think that's actually happening too, because there's women who have multiple men putting money in their cash app. There's people who have their whatever private channels, and men are putting money in there to view them and so on. But as I said, what I think is lost is this beautiful thing where guy meets girl, guy introduces himself to girl, there's a little bit of dating, and then they get involved. That's just not happening the way it used to. I mean, the reality is things and times change, right? And so we cannot expect in 2024 to be having the same sort of scenario as 1970. Okay, it's 50 years onwards. But what obtains now is kind of scary, people. And I'm wondering now to myself if part of it isn't being projected so that certain behaviors are normalized. For example, those, housewives of this and housewives of that, the reality shows where they're projecting certain behaviors, attitudes, and ways of being, and that's what's making the young people move towards those behaviors. What do you think?
I just want to touch on one last thing. I just didn't get a chance to. I just want to say, both sides need to be socialized. It's not necessarily a woman should be doing these things or a man. Like both sides need to be socialized and retaught how to approach this thing for it to be healthy. That's all I want to say for long-term relationships, because we always talk about building nations and building this and that. And the way the thing is structured right now with this individualism and the selfish behavior and the selfish outlook on life, there is no future because the family is the future. So how can we talk about a family future when the interactions are transact? What can I get out of it? That's the source of the interaction. What can I get out of this transaction?
I think quick. So something I noticed of recent, right? Within the marketing and advertisement space, there's a particular target audience that's really coming to the forefront, which is single women, and this is brought forward by a particular media, whatever they call the influencer media itself, where influencers are directly be getting paid to target single women to bring out the criteria of single women to be more what do you call it now, more proud and all of these things. These are direct tactics that are being used right now. Do you think that is having a ripple effect, as you call it, on I would say millennial women after there are any other women within that age group, so to speak?
Well, I think
Charlie,
sorry, go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Oh, well, I think two things are at play. Um, Advertisement and marketing does shape social change, but advertisement and marketing are also motivated by social phenomena. So, although yes, there is some engineering going on in terms of pushing a particular message, but the reality is that birth rates are dropping. The percentage of women who are single and childless in their 30s and 40s now are much higher than in the 70s. And we know that from when it comes to capitalism and you know the industrialization of needs, they tend to target women because we buy the most. So if you are a corporation seeking to make billions, which they all are, it would make sense for you to target single women and to glorify this idea of being happy with your cats with a latte in your one bedroom. You know, that's what's going to happen. But it doesn't mean that it's not a very real social phenomenon. I think both affect each other. And before I close, no one is allowed to call me by my slave master's name tonight, please. It's Kishi or Makeda.
Okay, you hear how she bad way up.
No McDonald,
Okay,
please.
okay, Takeda. Yes. I quite agree with Makeda, that they are normalizing childless, successful, single 30-year-old women. And I suppose it's sort of a way to normalize it and make it be okay that you're not dating, but you're okay because you make six figures and you're traveling the world and you have your cats, you don't need anything else. So that's a concern. And again, I feel like that is also engineered so that women just are not even interested in having children, because that's how you destroy the fabric of society. That's how you disintegrate the whole familial structure going forward. That's how you drop birth rates, you know? Yeah.
Did anyone else want to add something to that particular topic before we move on?
Yeah, I think part of what is being done also is a hyper focus on the very real, let me emphasize, the very real levels of femicide, domestic violence, essay that happens in heterosexual relationships. Now, if we are really committed to exploring the truth, which I know we are, we can't leave those very realities out of the conversation. And going back to Paula's example of what happened in the 1970s, we make a very dangerous mistake if we are going to romanticize the past. Because a lot of what we're seeing now, the millennials are children of mothers who were abused, who grandmothers who pulled them aside and said, don't let this happen to you. They were literally, they had the fear of God put in them that partnering with a male can be detrimental to your mental wellness, your physical well-being, etc. Add to that, we've had a good decade of reckless podcasting by members of our community telling women, if you get abused, it's your fault. You need to pick better. You need to say no. You need to close your legs. Well, that's what's happening. Women are closing their legs. And that when you close your legs, the birth rate declines. So I believe if we want to see change, we have to look at all angles and take everything into consideration. The good, the bad, and the ugly.
It's interesting because there's so much contrast, really, because at the same time that women are closing their legs, there's a lot of freaky behavior being normalized as well. So I'm scanning by a podcast and I'm listening to this woman talk about when she was having sex with three men and two other women. And I'm like, what? And these must be single women, but this is just how they're operating. So there's a lot of stuff and there's a lot of layers of things happening that is very I can't explain it. I can't fathom it. I just know that again, they've normalized it and they've said, oh, I'm sexually liberated, so I can have sex with five men. So there's just a lot of layers to this. And again, it is being driven by media, right? Um, Media, and also this whole new thing where they're normalizing acceptance of who you are and who I am, and they're weaving it into the whole mix. So it's a very chaotic and confused melee, right? I don't know if you guys are getting what I'm saying, because these are not different layers of women. These are the same women that say, I'm 30 something year old, I'm single, whatever, whatever, whatever. But at the same time, they're liberated, they're sexually liberated, and they find it okay to partake of very odd situations that they're not a part of. They just participate in it and then they're off to another part of the world again. I'm single. You understand what I'm saying? All of that is
Yeah.
happening. We can't say it's not happening. It is happening.
Yes. From what I understand, people are having a lot of sex, right? I think they're more strategic in not having children. I think that's what's taking place. Teaching teenagers uh, for a while, I really did notice that, and they're teenagers. They're having sex, but teenage pregnancy is down. But the teenage pregnancy is not necessarily down due to lack of sex. They're just so stern on that having children fire. You get what I'm saying? And the
Yes,
abortion clinics is packed and overloaded 24/7. That's something we
And
have
yes.
not
to too, you know.
Right. And not to mention the Plan B era. We're in the Plan B era, right? So they don't
Yes,
even have to stay pregnant anymore, really. And
they just
nobody
take the morning.
knows.
Yeah, they take the morning after pill after an irresponsible evening, and they're good. So yeah,
Does anyone else want to touch on this? I wanted to jump into the area of marriage. Far, you want to add something to it?
Yeah, something when we want to say, or probably just throw it out there, right? And I know somebody said this recently to me in a reasoning where the men generally speaking, if you think about the destruction of the world, who actually press the button towards the destruction of the world whenever world war or go on any form of major war, these are men who are actually pressing this. We don't know who is behind the scenes, but thinking about it from ego is usually associated with men, and leadership, all of these leadership and all of these different connotations, right? And I feel like at certain intervals, what I've seen is that a lot of women who are now in positions of leadership are taking on some of these bad habits of some of these men, as opposed to keeping that same energy, that energy that they should have, their natural leadership energy. Do you see that as a major problem with the emulation of man when it comes to leadership, as opposed to a natural free flowing leadership when it comes to women?
I'm definitely seeing that sort of imbalance where women are embodying the masculine principle a little bit more just to be able to survive in this environment. As Keisha was saying before, we are striving to be neck and neck with men when it really wasn't by nature. We're designed to be doing things a little different and embodying more of the feminine principle in how we interact, how we communicate, and how we solution. So, for example, I'm going to use myself as an example so that we can segue into marriage. But I, when I was growing up, I was basically what I was taught was what, listen, you have raw meat, you have to go find the fire, right? So I became a go-getter. What does a go-getter become? A go-getter is a masculine principle. I am going after what I want. And that's what's happening. So a lot of the success and entrepreneurial programs are designed around being go-getters, not procrastinating, not being soft and allowing things to come to you, not being soft and keeping honey in your mouth when you speak. A woman is supposed to be able to get solution because she's soft and she's convincing and she's able to go into a situation and pacify it and get everyone to do what she wants, not just go in and say, right, listen, I'm the boss. Let's get it together now. You shut up. You get your butt going. You this, you know what I mean? And get the party going. So I think you're very correct in saying that women, the modern woman, has taken on more of the masculine principle in order to survive in the man's world.
And that's a great
So
segue.
can I respond? Is it
Us.
okay if I just want to add something? Um, well, first of all, anyone who says men are responsible for the destruction of the world, they need to be specific because Black men weren't included in the destruction of the world. So that's one. But secondly, similarly to white supremacy and racism, the idea of patriarchy as we know it is a system. So just like it doesn't matter if you have a million Black mayors in America, doesn't matter if you have a so-called Black president. They're simply the face of a system, and they're going to execute that system to perfection. So it doesn't matter if the face of patriarchy is female or male, because the system is already intact. So we as women can't expect to extract any empowerment by simply just replacing men. We have to be willing to, as Paula said, completely reject that way of being, that go-getter, team no sleep attitude, and tap into our creativity or internal wisdom as women, and completely change the way we operate. But outside of that, it's just a system. It's the same system, but they have just put the woman in the front of it, just like how they put Barack Obama in front
Yeah.
of American imperialism.
Yes, I agree.
And I would appreciate if everyone could just give examples of how you manage to balance being a strong woman at the same time having the feminine energy that you spoke about. If you could provide some examples for those listening.
I'll go first. I I got married when I was 50. I got married in 2020. Okay, so this is recent. And when I took the decision to get married, it was out of a, a knowing and an understanding that I had become very masculine. I was, I've been providing for myself all my life, and getting married, I took a decision that I was going to step aside and allow my husband to embody the divine masculine, be my provider, be my protector. It doesn't mean that I suddenly lost all my senses. It just meant that I wasn't going to push and take the lead in certain things. And do you know what happened? My stepping back allowed my husband to step forward and assume the role of protector provider. And I got to soften, and I got to still play a role. And we now have a very balanced relationship where I am the woman and he is the man, in terms of how I behave, in terms of how he behaves. And we have not lost anything in terms of, I've just become nicer, I
Mhm.
think.
I love that. I love that. And so for myself, I speak for myself when I say this. I was operating out of survival mode versus masculine energy, if you will, due to the fact that since I was a child, I had to always fend for self. I had to take care of myself. There was no one around that was nurturing and caring and showing me how to do certain things. So I was in survival mode. So sometimes people see it as a woman being in their masculine energy when in reality she's in survival mode. But I will say this, after I saw that, you know what, you don't have to be in that energy anymore. I was able to teach myself how to be more feminine, how to be softer, how to be more nurturing, how to be more caring in my feminine energy. But prior to that, I was seen as like having masculine energy, but it was due to the fact that I was in survival mode. I didn't have a choice. I had to be at the forefront. I had to put myself first because I didn't have anybody around to do that.
Yes.
I know this is going to sound strange, but I believe I owe that aspect of my being to my father. I believe it was my father who really first instilled the concept of what feminine, the balance between being feminine and strong was. And he did that by expressing to me very clearly that everything that he thought was good in me was either gender neutral or as a result of my femininity. So my father would encourage me to challenge him on various topics. He would encourage me to go as far as my mind would allow me. He would encourage me and tell me that I'm a natural leader. But he never communicated in a way where I felt like I was being a boy. He made it very clear that there's certain things that my brothers were allowed to do that I wasn't allowed to do. But all the things that I felt were good in me, that he felt were good in me, he attributed that to femininity. And also the way he treated my mom. He consulted her with everything. My mom was very strong, very hard headed, very domineering. but he allowed her to the space to kind of control certain aspects of the home, certain aspects of the business, without ever making her feel small. So I am really grateful to my father for that. And it's his lessons have allowed me to, even when I slip up, because I do slip up, I think back to my father's lessons and what he taught me and how he treated my mother.
Yeah, I just wanted to it is kind of jumping back, but I did want to acknowledge one of these questions here from the members. If I could put it up there. Shauna said, no one talks about this is jumping back. No one talks about nuances with creating multiple soul ties with no emotion. I guess they were talking about the multiple partners at the time.
Partners, yes.
And I know usually when we speak about sex, it's the STDs, the STIs, or the children, but we don't speak about enough the emotional ties. So, would anyone like to touch on that?
Um, I don't think anybody um, taught their children about that. It's not one of the conversations that elders necessarily have with the young ones. And so they have to go through it and then read about it on social media to realize that, listen, this wasn't just a sexual interaction. This has resulted in some serious emotional entanglements that are not easy to undo. And so we need to, I think, help our young people to understand that going into a relationship also has much to do with the residuals, the emotional residuals, the spiritual residuals of that relationship if it does not work out. And so, you're not just looking at the physical person and the financial, but you're looking at what they have been doing. Were they sleeping around with a ton of other people? And so when you get into that situation, what are the repercussions for you, right? So I think it's really up to us as the older ones to help the young ones to understand that there's many layers to relationships. And because people don't think about that, they're just thinking, oh, he's hot, oh, she's sexy, I just want to get with her. And they're not thinking about the other things. Yet they know, everybody knows what it feels like when you break up. And sometimes it's so painful because there's so much more to the breakup than just the relationship, it's the soul ties. And so I'm very happy that someone raised that issue, you know?
I'm paraphrasing my old head when he said this, and this applies for men and women. But the good loving to really mess up your life. A lot of people
Yes,
stay in relationships for a duration of time, or deal with so much experiences due to the sexual performance or the sexual pleasure they receive, and that's just not a reality people talk about. And
yes,
what people need to understand is you don't need to experience everything, because some of the things you experience, you may like it too much, and you may not be able to walk away from it.
exactly.
You know.
Yes.
Does anyone else want to touch on this before we go into marriage?
Well, I think Char made an excellent observation when she talked about the era of the plan B. Before, the consequences of sex, being pregnancy, etc., was much more of an immediate reality. So, you know, the idea of promiscuity and getting all these soul ties, you could at least be a little bit more discouraged. But now, as Shar said, it's the age of plan B's, it's the age of doing all these things to prevent pregnancy. So people don't think about soul ties because sex is such a quick and easy commodity, and it's just sad. I agree with what Paula said too.
All right. I wanted to touch on marriage now, right? Marriages seem to be very short term nowadays, right? It's an in and out type vibe, and I would appreciate if anyone could share skills they learn to deal with the natural ups and downs. I would say ups and downs, the cycles of marriage, right? You have your times, and I would appreciate if you could share with those listening to encourage them how they can navigate those cycles of marriage.
Right. One of the number one things that I always tend to lean towards is to always make sure you're holding the mirror in front of yourself. Always look at yourself first, because it's so easy to point the finger at your partner, to point the finger at your spouse, but it's really harder to look at yourself in that mirror. And that's where it's more imperative, because sometimes, you're not seeing yourself in the situation. Other times you're not perceiving how you're causing the other person to feel in certain manners. And at the end of the day, if you can't look at yourself in the mirror, then how can you be attentive to your person and actually see where they're actually coming from? There is so much power in being self-aware and looking at yourself first.
I agree. I agree.
Yes, I agree with that, Char. I think women more than men are guilty of this. And obviously, that has a lot to do with the way we were socialized. But you should not expect, and you cannot expect, to get all your needs filled by your husband. Women need to come out of this mentality. Your husband is not your girlfriend, he's not your sister girl, he's a man. And one of the reasons why women don't have fulfillment in their marriage is because they don't seek purpose inside themselves first. As Shar said, they're not holding up the mirror to themselves. What is my purpose here on earth? Why don't you get creative? Why don't you connect with other women? Women spend so much energy chasing, men, trying to search their phones, trying to become I spy detectives, when they could be using that time to pour into themselves, pour into their health, pour into their children, pour into the community.
Mm.
But what we do, we have these unrealistic Prince Charming expectations for a man to be something that he's frankly not built to be.
Right.
I
And
agree.
really quick, just to add to what I said earlier, and thank you, Kishi, I appreciate it. Is that I always stress communication, 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 because so many times people don't even know what proper communication looks like. And I feel like this goes back to, as especially like in certain households that we grew up in, a kid was taught to be seen and not heard. And so what happens is you have these kids that you're telling to be quiet all the time. You're only supposed to be seen, but yet you expect them to be adolescents and young adults and then go into marriages and business and have these relationships where they're supposed to thrive in communication and be able to communicate properly. But yet these are kids who are now adults who are taught to always to shut up.
I agree. I agree.
and
That
and
that's
because you asked for guidance for persons who might be thinking of getting married, or those who are younger and just starting out their marriage, I believe every Black man and woman should read a book called The Spirit of Intimacy, which teaches the ancient ways of African relationships. It's by an author called Mbomfo. Forgive me if I'm butchering her name, but it's The Spirit of Intimacy. And she goes in depth into the Dakara people and their ancient ways, and the West African traditions surrounding marriage, resolving conflict, how to deal with children, how to deal with trauma. We really have to come out of this habit of examining ourselves and our relationships through the lens of Western sociology. We have to look to our ancestral knowledge and our ancestral ways. And I recommend that book to everyone who is thinking of getting married or who is currently married. It's very helpful. Read it with your partner. You won't regret it.
Really.
brilliant. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Um, for me, I think I agree with Shar about communication, 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 because we really have been taught to put up and shut up. And so a lot of people, both the male and the female, they put up and shut up for a very long time until the situation becomes a pressure cooker and it explodes, and then it's irreconcilable, right? I think it's just very important for you to go in to a marriage always thinking, how would I feel if someone did this to me, right? We don't do that enough. We just do what we want because we feel to do it, and we think it's okay, and we're okay with it. So he has to take that because yeah, he's lucky he got me, or she's lucky I'm paying for her all her bills, so she has to put up with my three mistresses outside of the marriage because she's a wife and she lives in the house. So it's a lot of that where we have these norms, we've accepted them, and we don't even have the ability to sit down and say, listen, I didn't sign up for this, and this isn't really what I wanted. How can we resolve this?
Yeah.
How can we navigate this without, again, um, husband makes a constructive criticism, wife shuts down, she's upset, she's not speaking to him, and then he doesn't know how to speak to her because he's offended her now.
Yeah.
Things like that. I think a lot of it is also learned behavior. We watch on TV how women react. Honey, how do I look?
Yeah.
You look okay, and that people see that and they're like, oh, it's a meltdown because he didn't say I'm beautiful. Oh, I'm too fat. And it's learned behaviors. This is what we're seeing. It's part of the programming, and we just need to just dial it back and just become realistic and learn how to speak with the other person who we've made a commitment to marry.
But you know
Ab-
what, Paula? You know what? If
Yeah.
I think, and I don't know if you guys plan to discuss it,
Hmm.
but one thing I don't want us to overlook or neglect in this conversation tonight, a lot of the behaviors, the lack of accountability, the irritability that we're seeing has a lot to do with our health. A lot of women are dealing with hormonal imbalance based on the food that we are being
Absolutely.
fed. We are disproportionately, as Black women, struggling with womb issues like fibroids, endometriosis, etc. And these things affect your mood. It
Yeah.
affects your libido.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
affects your ability to have a civil conversation with your partner. And similarly, the
Yeah.
men are consuming foods that are high in estrogen. Testosterone levels are at an all-time low.
Dropping.
So the men are sassy. They're no longer walking out arguments. They're no longer
Too much
being left
sigh.
be. No, for real. So we have a situation where we have the woman who is imbalanced because she's dealing with all these toxins in her womb, in her body. She's on edge. She's literally hysterical. And we have a man who has no idea how to be masculine because he's consuming foods that are designed not accidentally, it is by calculated design to lower his testosterone and to make him unbearable, make him unnecessarily aggressive or unnecessarily cowardice. Coward,
Passive. Yes. Yes.
passive, yes.
Yeah.
So we really have to discuss health. And I must say to women, we need to reclaim our place as the providers of nutrition, as the herbalists in the home. We need to take over the kitchen. We need to take responsibility for our family's nutrition, right? That is our divine right and our divine, one of our many divine roles. So
Rose.
women
Yes.
need
I
to
agree.
learn more about herbs, about nutrition, so that the children, herself, and her man can be on better footing.
You
That's an
know,
excellent point. Keisha, when you started talking, Keisha, I thought you were going to actually make reference to the fact that a lot of how we are responding and relating to each other had a lot to do with our background on the slave plantations, which is kind of, especially among people of color, a situation where we were not really allowed to express our love and affection to each other because, the slave masters would use that against us and kill the men in the middle of the plantation to punish us, to keep us in line, and so on. Someone made reference to the fact that Jamaican people, especially, are not very affectionate. They don't hug and kiss each other and say, love you, right? Because of what we had to endure on the plantations. So I think it's also important for us to reference the fact that we as a people have sort of been trained to put this uh, this tough exterior out there and not show our affection and softness with each other as man and a woman. And so a lot of our ancestral traumas color the interactions that we are having today.
And
And just really quick, Kishi, I have to call this one out because I do not appreciate the fact that the whole men are acting sassy thing. I feel like that's belittling. I feel like it's degrading towards our men, and I don't feel like they're acting sassy. They may act out in certain ways, and we can talk about the behaviors, but I don't think that calling them sassy is acceptable. One of the points that I wanted to make earlier is the fact that so many times, especially people that tend to watch certain things and listen to certain music, sway certain ways. It's like they think that marriage is a show. They want the wedding, they want the ring, they want the reception, and they think that that's the way that things are supposed to be, and that they have to have this $10,000 ring, $20,000 ring. They have to have this, what is it, $250,000 wedding, when in reality none of that goes into the actual marriage. You can go to the beach and go jump a broom and be married, but the simple fact that a lot of women see the wedding as a show now just so they can post it is absurd to me.
Yes, I agree
Well,
with that.
I want to just say that the description of a man acting sassy might sound harsh, but the reality is, and obviously we're not talking about all men, the reality is the diet of the standard Western diet is laced with estrogen, laced with soy lecithin, laced with coloring, laced with all kinds of phytoestrogen that
We
are
understand that.
designed to affect the hormonal balance of men and women. Now, the fact that we in Jamaica, for example, we have men who are bleaching their skin from head to toe. We have men who are in the middle of a party who are whining on their head top. These are social and cultural phenomenon. This is not something that we can get away from discussing. Now, if you want to say, well, it's a word best used to describe a specific sector of men, then yes, because we can't speak in the 100 percentile. But certainly, in the same way, we have women who are over masculinized, we have men who are effeminate, and the men themselves are complaining. The men themselves are complaining that we have a serious lack of masculinity amongst our men.
I
You
just,
know what?
Far, I just want to add two things, right? And I just want to bring context to it for people listening. Um, I know you're not fully blaming certain behaviors on food. I just want to make that clear, right? There are other issues because sometimes people listen to these things and they take it well far. There are other social issues. Obviously, the main one being a household that leads to those behaviors. But I want to talk about earlier in regards to the food and the preparation with women. Yes, women should take that role, but we have to acknowledge that due to the structure, how things are structured at the moment, it is kind of hard for them to do it, especially with the work schedule that they have, the amount of kids that they have, and lack of support. I believe that can be done when you actually have a communal support where you have other hands to help you. But unfortunately, what's the proper term for it? They call it a nuclear family. That's your main family right now, basically. Like it's just me, my wife, and my daughter. You get what I'm saying? My parents are in Jamaica, her parents are in Baltimore, and we
Yeah,
have a nice
nuclear
sisters,
family.
nuclear family. But a lot of people really struggle with that because that's an unnatural thing, you know.
True.
And it's like it limits what you can do, and I think that plays a big role in regards to the health because if both parents need to work to survive, that limits the amount of time to cook. Then when you get to cooking, do you have time or are you in a mind state to cook nutritional food because you're in a survival mode? So I just want to put that out there in regards to context. I believe for that to be done and executed the way you gave, you need that community and you need that support.
No, you're absolutely right. But as you mentioned earlier, because of the change in our circumstances, we have to be creative. So if we're not able to do everything at home from scratch, then we have to have a community that provides resources for where we can get seeds, where we can get fresh food. You know, it's not limited to just, as you said, the nuclear family, which is a completely false and unnatural construct that can be detrimental to both women and children. You need to be able to be creative, reach out to other members of the community, have events, have farmers market. We can do all of that as a community. We don't have to put the burden on one person. But what I'm saying is it's very imperative for the woman to take the initiative and the interest into herbs, natural foods, and healing the family and the community through diet.
Yeah. Because one of the issues I have, and this is not because of you, but this is in general, especially with the interviews when we do on the channel, I think our approach to life sometimes is too idealistic, and we take our abilities and what we're able to do and put it on other people who are not in that position. And I just think that we need to do a better job collectively of presenting information that's applicable to the masses. And I had to check myself on that too because I remember talking to people, but I'm talking to them based on what I'm able to do, and they're not able to do it. And we need a broader view in regards to even simple things like herbs. Like I know it sounded way still. You have to remember the context. You may be tied in with certain people. You live in a certain area, but people in other areas they're pretty expensive. So you can't go
Yeah.
tell a man to get 5 different form of bushes. You know what I'm saying? And they're on suffer heights. It's just not realistic. And I just think when we have these conversations, we can provide these examples, but at the same time, we have to be understanding and realistic of people's situation in this environment, economically as well as their family situation.
I think and a statement to make away. I really don't want it just fly over it. So we need to get some clarity on that. I think when you mentioned the cowardice men, so to speak, and I need to really feel like with a lot, I know a lot of men listening to this reasoning now. What is the definition of a cowardice man from a female perspective, a revolutionary female perspective, just so men can understand how they're viewed from a revolutionary standpoint when it comes to the feminine energy, and if there's something we need to be corrected, because I don't want we scroll over the part there. We need to highlight the part and have a reasoning we can get a way forward, because I think it's necessary.
Well, I'm very encouraged by that question. That means that, we also want men to be accountable. But from a revolutionary perspective, when I think of cowardice as a general criticism, not individual, the refusal to put our energies and attack our real oppressor and using that energy to attack the person in front of us. So what I see happening, rather than addressing the systematic issues, the structures of oppression, what we keep having are these very surface level conversations where we see with someone is saying, oh, it's my woman's fault, or my woman won't let me be great, or let me go argue with her or argue with somebody in the community. That to me is the very epitome of cowardice. And if we look at our esteemed elders and ancestors, the approach was never to attack each other on an individual level. The approach is to take on massa. So when a man is going to tell me that in order for him to feel like a man, he needs his woman to be subservient to him, I consider that cowardice. Because if you're subservient in every other aspect of your life, you're subservient when you go to Africa and there's Chinese, European, and everybody in control but you. You're subservient at the corporation that we can't even get clean water. We can't even get fresh food. In Jamaica, we don't have equal access to beaches. As African people, we have to pay non-African people just to access a beach. Now, to me, if you are tapping into what you are, the black man is the greatest warrior that has ever lived on the face of the earth. If you are tapping into who you are, then I need to see that masculine energy, that moving energy, where we need to do something about the beach access. We need to do something about what's happening with our water supply. Don't come to me on a podcast or on some platform telling me that your woman won't do what you want her to do. Your woman, she's raising her voice. She's not calling you sir. She's not rubbing your feet when you get home. We have bigger issues, and we need to step into our warrior spirit, men particularly, and attack our real enemy so that we can have real change. The woman in the blonde wig, the black woman in the blonde wig, as annoying as it may be to you, is not your enemy.
Anyone else want to touch on that one before we go to the next part?
You know, why you're the female, why you're the feminine sound panda one, because I feel like this topic is very, very crucial.
I agree with Keisha on the areas of our men not stepping up to the plate on the wider community-based issues and recognizing that it would be their role to have that fight. But I also understand that it's years of programming and disempowerment that has caused that to happen. And so I think the challenge is really to see how we can assist our people, both male and female, in understanding that they have a role to play in coming together to reclaim the sovereignty that we have lost as a people of color all over the world, you know? So I think that's a whole other conversation, but a conversation that needs to be had because we are actually in that time when it is said, you know, prophecy, they say that the 400 or the 500 years of subjugation are over and we can reclaim it. But no, there are so many other issues that are keeping us from coming together and and attacking the real issues and the real enemies. And I feel now that we're having this discussion that it is perhaps by design why, you know, we're all pitted against each other. Because if we should ever unite and move towards solutioning, with the males playing their role as divine masculine and the women playing their role as divine feminine, bringing their heads, their hearts and minds together, they would solution and be so powerful. So they have all these things that are pitting us against each other. So that's how I'm looking at it right now.
I have a question for Keisha, right? Based on what you said, what do you think about this though? I think one of the issues that we don't men don't view themselves as part of the collective, and they really have this individual, like we have to acknowledge the selfish individualistic mind frame that they have, right? So I hear a lot of times from brothers, because referring to black men, that if they're experiencing any type of success in their eyes, they consider themselves successful on an individual level. But everything we're talking about is on the collective. And I think one of the issues, they don't identify in any collective. It's just about me. It's just about, they don't even care about their own immediate family if you really talk to them and get down to the nitty gritty. You get what I'm saying? So like, that's a key point. We will have to acknowledge that it's not there, and we have to work on the younger generation of instilling that mind frame that there is a collective success that's before you're in the, that is just the collective. It's not even an individual success. It's a collective success, and you identify with that. But I think that's one of the issues in regards to that manhood you spoke about, because what you're speaking about is sacrifice. Why would I sacrifice for the collective when it's all about the individual?
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And unfortunately, it's one of the ills of capitalism and modern day individualism that it promotes. So going back to what I said, one of the simple things that Black men could do in their communities, an actionable item, rather than complaining about the negative results of the single woman-led family. I ask these men all the time, and I swear to you, I get the same response. What organization do you lead? Are you starting? Are you part of that's responsible for mentoring the young children in your community? Forget children, just the young boys. Do you have a systematic program in place in just your little corner of the world where you are mentoring young boys? No, they don't. They're over and hyper focused on whether the woman has a partner in her bed. So if she doesn't have a man in the home assisting to raise the children, then the children can go to hell. And Umar Johnson spoke of this recently. It can't be that we say, men or women, but let's talk about men. It can't be that we say, if the children are from single mother families are wayward, that it's the mother's problem. It's everybody's problem. It's everybody's problem. And so just to even let's look at Jamaica again. If you go into any garrison or so-called ghetto, just to clean the trenches, the gullies, a group of men can be organized once a month and to clean the community instead of waiting on the government to come and do it. This is what I'm talking about, that masculine, actionable energy that seems to have been lost. No, I want to make a point because I don't want to forget it. And it would be remiss of me in the spirit of honoring our ancestors not to bring this up. To say that Black women have not been accountable in the community is disingenuous. If we look at the Black Panther Party, 60% of the members were women. If we look at the many wars that were waged on African soil, the Battle of Adwa, the Empress was side by side her husband. If we look at the Civil War protest videos, we see young men and young girls both getting hosed and bitten by dogs side by side. The truth is, the African man does not have a history of struggling by himself. The African woman is always with him on the front lines. And we have to acknowledge, as you said earlier, the effects of that, the hardening that comes with 400 years of being on the front line militarily with your man. You can't expect your military partner, your general, your squaddy, to be as soft as she would be if she didn't have to fight on every front with you. No other race of men can boast that their women are as involved in their revolution and rebellion as the African man. So when we talk about accountability, we need to be honest and we need to pay homage to our ancestors correctly.
I just want to say, I just want to be clear or get clarification. You're not referring to accountability like we meant earlier in regards to relationships. You're talking about collective. I just want to
No. I'm just expanding it because we're talking about our various roles in the community.
Yeah, different vibe.
Yeah, yeah.
I wanted to touch on something else too. And me and Farah had this conversation, and this goes for men and women. A lot of times we criticize and chastise people for things that they never learned how to do, or they were never in an environment to learn how to do. So there's a lot of criticism on womanhood, which we spoke about, and manhood. And this is my I'm a man, obviously, right? And this is my observation. And what I observe is that, and this is not to what's the term they use for not to excuse behaviors, right? I'm not excusing behaviors, but I'm being realistic. And when I observe men, everything is a learned behavior, and this man has never learned to be a man. So the expectation is unrealistic. You're looking for something that this person does not know how to do. And that's a
And I
key
think,
component. Go ahead, Farah.
and I think where the challenge come into play is that with the whole social expectations of what men are supposed to do, especially when it comes to those relationship. And I think that's a question where they both come up by me, right? A lot of men don't know how to lead, but are being thrown in this leadership position by whether it be society, whether it be in a relationship itself. How does that work from your perspective, or how do you view that from your perspective?
And I want to add something to the question for everyone here, right? When do you decide? Because I know it's this default thing, but I believe there are areas where women should be leading. So how do you decipher when you're supposed to lead and when you're supposed to follow?
Well, with respect to leadership, I think people know what a natural leader is. And there are people who will just be very shy and they want to be in the background and they want to support and they want to be in the background. So I think in terms of leadership, people always know who the natural leaders are. And you can have a natural leader that's a woman and a natural leader that's a man. Okay? So that's one thing. In terms of how the, the question about people who are thrust into positions of leadership, by virtue of their family or their education, when they're really not leaders, they just have maybe the highest qualification, then that's a whole nother issue. It's going to suffer because they're not natural leaders. People are drawn to a natural leader. And so sometimes when you have an organization, the troublemaker, that troublemaker, the one who rally the staff to stand up against management, that's a leader. But because he doesn't have the qualification, he probably is not placed into leadership. All right. So that's how I view this leadership thing. Now, in terms of I think I might have forgotten the question. Keisha, you want to answer while I?
Gather your thoughts. Sure.
Yes,
I
yes.
think I think those are really, really important questions, because going back to what we said in terms of being away from our original cultural container, we come from societies where men have rites of passage. There's a rites of passage that develops you into manhood. Your responsibilities as a man is very clear. You know what your role is in this community, and you're supported not just by the women but by the elder men. You're trained by them. The elders advise you and guide you. And you're quite right, for a lot of men, they're kind of left out in the cold to kind of decipher. So you go to a black man and he's idolizing godfathers, Italian gangsters that used to call us all kinds of names like monkeys. The average black man who is not necessarily stepped into his consciousness still idolizes an Italian gangster as the ultimate man. So there is that. But in terms of not being fit to fill this role, I'm very passionate about that too, because part of the problem is religion. Religion automatically places the male, the man, in a leadership role just by virtue of his gender. So if you look at Judeo-Christian religions, it's the man is the head, the woman is beneath him, and the children. Not all men are fit to be competent in that role. And if you think about it, if you think about what a community is, a man who is 30 years old, who is given the task by virtue of religion and societal and patriarchal expectations to be this leader, he doesn't have elders to guide him. He doesn't have a rites of passage. He's just thrown into this role and said, you are the leader. You are the alpha. This is why we have so much abuse, confrontation, unhappiness, because no one knows what that means. It's just a role that's handed out to each and every man. Not every man is fit for leadership, right? So for me, people should lead. You decide upon a leader based on their competence, just like with anything else. There are certain things that I am more competent in than my husband, and there are certain things that he's more competent in than I am, just by virtue of number one. What?
No, go ahead. No, you're getting where I want to get. Finish your argument. You're getting where I want to get. Finish what you saying.
So we have to understand, going back to the not equal but equitable, that we all have different roles. And you're not an automatic leader. You're not an automatic head of anything. We come from a society where in order to govern the community, you had to be at least 80 years old. A 35-year-old man said he's the head of household is just a recipe for disaster. We need to bring back community, bring back gender, better define the gender roles, and allow people to lead according to their competence.
Yeah, I'm glad you broke it down like that, because I think when leadership is presented, it's presented in an absolute. And as a leader, I can identify times I'm supposed to lead and times I'm supposed to follow. I don't lead every time because it's not needed for me to lead. There are times for this thing to work properly where I have to follow, and I have enough discernment to understand that. I think this absolute concept of leadership, because there's, as you said, there's certain instances, there's certain things that I cannot lead in, or I'm not the best person to lead in this particular area. Now, I want to be clear, I still understand, like, as a man, but I understand, like, this leadership is presented as this absolute. In every single situation, you're the leader, and that's unrealistic. And you have to identify the areas where you need to be a support, or you need to support, and someone else is more fit to lead in this particular area. And I think
but if we think of the best leaders, they were first followers, they were first best students. Malcolm X, all these men, these great men and women, you have to be a good student in order to be a teacher. Humility is the way of the leader.
No, but we don't put student in past context. It's an ever-flowing thing.
True. Very true.
It's an ongoing thing. It's a cycle. It's a leadership cycle within my marriage. There are areas that my wife has to lead in the area.
Yes.
And I have to follow for this thing to work properly. Then there are other areas where I lead. And I think that's the issue. Obviously, there are more deeper things. Obviously, a certain level of maturity, a certain level of understanding of yourself. But people listening, I hope they start to understand this concept of absolute leader. I'm the leader of everything. It doesn't work like that. You're going to flop yourself.
Yeah.
Because I don't care to the day you drop dead. There's areas where you have to follow.
Yes.
Absolutely. I'm hearkening back to, growing up, where my father would say, I am the head of the house. You have to follow, right? And it was okay. Then he sent us to university, and we come back with an influx of new ideas that we want to suggest to him. And then he wouldn't relinquish his role as leader to take in the new ideas because he's the leader. And I'm like, but daddy, you sent us to university. No, I'm here with ideas and you don't want to accept them. Right. So it's kind of one of those things where we all have to, as you said, Junior, recognize when it's the time to lead and when it's the time to follow, and to defer to the person who is more competent in that area of leadership
and support.
Yes.
That's the key thing. Support.
Yes.
I that's a the I feel like the best and way I can I probably more watch too much football, but the best way I think or you analyze the whole thing is you have to have the person who are drop back a little bit, control the
Yes.
middle, control the middle. That person at one time who is defending, and then that person who is attacking. And I feel like a very important part of the whole conversation too is that, regardless of even if you have two leaders, I feel like most people feel like this leadership thing is a competition too, especially when it comes to the male and female. They don't understand the concept. Say even if you have leaders on a team, but you always have a team captain who can always use that experience being the captain, ensures this situation, this pocket is closed so that opponent don't come in. So different ways or we have to think about it, but that don't make it any less of a leader because there's a captain within the ranks of the whole thing. It's just that there's a better direction towards where we're going and how we're going to win this match, so to speak, you know?
Right.
But
Right.
I want to add something though, because I saw something similar with my father, Paula. One of the attributes of a leader is that it comes with a lot of responsibility. You are at the front, you take the blame, you take the attacks. So sometimes when a man takes on that identity and he guards it very jealously, it's not because he wants to be tyrannical. It's because he understands that he wants to be the one. He wants to be like the shield for his family. Let me make the decisions because if it falls down, I want to be the one who is responsible. So in many ways, in that sense, it's an act of love. It's an act of love when a lot of men step up and say, listen, I'm the leader here. It's not because they want to subjugate their women and children, but they want to be the ultimate person responsible if anything should go down.
And yes, I get that. I think in his case that was what was going on. But of course, because I was like the young Turk, no,
Rebel.
come back. Yeah, it challenged me. I challenged the leadership, instead of him thinking that, hey, come, let me bring it on. Nana Fofie Carol, who was on the call a while ago, she was explaining about, in parts of Africa where there is polygamy and the wives recognize and are the ones who sometimes take the initiative to bring on another wife, especially within the context of the family business. You might have two older women, they are not tech savvy, and the business is growing, and they realize, hey, husband, we need a young wife, one that can do the travels and understand the tech so that the business can level up. And they go and they select that young wife. And so there is shared leadership where the business is concerned based on capabilities. And so that young wife does all the tech, she travels for all the business meetings and so on. She buys all the gifts for the other wives. And so it's a beautiful relationship because we have strategically put in place all the mechanisms for success. And this is how I think we were, the cultural container that we're from was like that. But the one that we've been placed in now looks at, the contract of marriage and infidelity and all of the strictures rather than how we can work together strategically to strengthen the collective based on everybody's strengths and weaknesses. You know what I mean?
No, I agree totally. I think one of the biggest lies that Western women have been told is that plural marriages, polygyny, is a result of patriarchy. It's actually an invention of matriarchy. The women were so close knit. We wanted to support each other. We wanted to take the load off each other. We function better when there is more of us, right? But because, you know, the concept, it has been perverted where women are abused. There is not enough dignity in a lot of cases, not all, but there's not enough dignity in these marriages where there are multiple wives. So now it becomes oppressive.
Mhm.
Previously, under matriarchy, having multiple wives is a source of power for the woman. That is how we prevent abuse, right? One man can't take on five women, right? So it's something that insulates you as a woman. You share the child rearing, you share the duties of the business or the family, as opposed to it being such a burden. But education and exposure and going back to our history is critical if we really want to understand the way forward.
Absolutely.
And last, well, if you have more, far right, but I wanted to hear your views on the future of marriage, right? Because as we spoke about early in regards to the, the whole relationship part that's going on, right? And everyone's always talking about the black family, the source of the black family. Based on my observation and how dating and mating is going at the moment, uh, I'm not too confident in the institution of marriage as we know it moving forward. Long term, put marriage to the side. Long term relationships, committed long term relationships between man and woman, right? So, what are your views about marriage in the future and the black family?
I'm like you. I'm not very optimistic about this whole notion of marriage in the future. We see, and again, it goes back to what is being projected on the silver screen and what the celebrities are doing. The celebrities, they get married and they have a divorce in a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. And then, the women know and the men are into this thing about being liberated, and at the first sign of any kind of discomfort, I want a divorce because it's an option, right? No, we all want to have options. We want to have free will. And again, religion was responsible for keeping us locked into misery for many, many years unnecessarily. So we now have, instead of like a happy medium, we have an extreme. We have a situation in the past where people suffered silently for years and died in misery. And now we have a situation where we're on the total end of the other end of the spectrum, where we're like, at the first sign of any kind of problem, everybody's out. So I think, as this person is saying, marriage in the Western world is problematic. It is. And so I think perhaps these young people will come up with a happy medium, right? But I don't feel very optimistic that there's going to be a happy medium, because, as we've all agree here, we don't have that mentorship going on where there's elders providing advice and wisdom to the young people. In fact, this channel serves that purpose for many of the young people. So I just want to commend you, gentlemen, for having this channel, something called I Never Knew, so that young people can listen to different thought leaders and learn something. So it actually fills that gap in terms of mentoring young people who would never be able to have some of the conversations that they hear on this channel. Keisha?
Yes, I agree with you that marriage, as it is in its current construct, is not going to last. But perhaps unlike you, I think that's a good thing. I think the Western construct of marriage is harmful. I think the nuclear family is a backward construct of family. I think we need to return to our original ways of relationships, or original ways of navigating the way men and women come together. And we need to, on the one hand, Sankofa and bring back our historical reality. But on the other hand, we need to assess, as Junior said, what is necessary and workable for us under this current system. Marriage as it is now is not good. It doesn't serve men or women. And I am happy that, as Bob Marley said, total destruction is the only solution.
Well, you might be happy because that might be exactly what is happening. It's interesting though. My concern now though is, yes, destruction or dissolution of that situation, but we haven't put in place the mechanism for going back into that container that we are from, and bringing forth or bringing into the current space for the
All right,
benefit of the
Paula,
young
let,
people.
let me give you a concrete example.
Yes.
In today in Jamaica, it a man can legally rape his, well, he can't be charged for rape if he rapes his wife under our marriage laws, under our sexual assault laws. You can't be
Hmm.
charged for raping your wife.
Hmm.
So, there are so many layers. We're coming out, we're holding on to these institutions that have existed since slavery, that were foisted upon us by our slave masters. At some point, we're going to have to say, okay, we may not have the answer, but as Malcolm X said, anything has to be better than this. So even though we don't have the immediate answer for what we should replace our slave master system with, at some point we have to have some dignity as a people to say, come what may, we're not continuing with this. So if it's polygamy, just like, there are other ethnicities that live within this country that don't necessarily live in accordance with what happens in terms of the marriage laws. There are other communities in Jamaica that practice polygamy.
Yes.
You
Yes.
see? So
And they're very successful.
and
They're
they're
very
very
successful.
successful at it. They homeschool their children, they have multiple wives. So we need to be brave enough to understand, is this thing working for us? Reject it and replace it with what works.
I just want to bring up two topics, and I'd like to hear what you have to say. We mentioned elders, right? Which is a big issue. There seems to be a disconnect between the older generation, the younger generation, and the younger generation, right? Also, when we're talking about men, polygamy, marriage, we have to acknowledge economics, right? Men aren't Men don't have the cap. All right, with the skill set many men have, they no longer have the capability to make enough money to lead a household or run a household. That's just a reality for this generation, and I think that's a big dynamic change we have to understand, because you may have had a high school degree in the 60s, you had job stability, and you were able to have an occupation that you can cover your expenses, your living, your food, and basic things. Even with a master's degree in the society, which many brothers don't have, or a regular degree or a high school degree, they're still not making a livable wage. And that's a key component in maintaining a house. And that leads to
Yes.
all the other isms we spoke about in regards to the frustrations and the abuse, because um, it's very demeaning if you're a man and you can't provide a stable place for your child,
Yes. It is. It
especially if
is.
you're crying. I'm not talking about somebody just killing on the side. I'm talking about someone who's actually leaving their house every day and trying, and you just don't make enough because you don't have the skill set to earn that money. And that's the harsh reality for many of our brothers.
Well, it's very interesting that you bring that point up, because what and I'm bringing this up, and people may think it's simplistic, but women, the divine feminine, actually has the ability to transmute situations. If she plays her role correctly, she can literally put so much I don't know, I don't want to use the word prayer because I don't want to bring anything in, but there is a way that women can empower their men to be able to feel so powerful that he literally begins to attract to him more than what he is um, trained or academically able to earn. And a lot of women have lost that art. No, the women in India literally use the act of sex and procreation to strengthen their men and his earning power. And I think the African um, uh, parts of the culture also spoke to that. That has purposely been that information and that knowledge has purposely been lost. So now we see a man, he has this qualification, and this therefore is the ceiling. But I have seen my with my own eyes how a woman's love and support and her vision for her man can propel him to be his absolutely best self. And that is something that I don't think we are doing, because we're like, if he isn't a millionaire, I don't want him. If he can't pay my bills, I don't want him. Right? If I did that, I wouldn't be married. Right? But I saw the person inside of I saw the soul of the person that I married to. And I'm seeing now where he is exceeding what I had originally, or anybody looking on would have originally thought, right?
And,
And that's because of the love, the support, and the prayers and the nourishment of the relationship. It can happen because I've seen it happen so many times.
and the question I would ask is that, do you think it's capable for a younger woman?
If she understands, and I think then it goes back to this whole thing of love, because we've seen it so many times where love is actually like a fertilizer. And love, when it is given in a powerful way, strengthens a man and makes him capable of doing more than he himself expected. So the love of a woman can make a man become more powerful. Yeah.
And I just wanna throw one more thing out there in regards to what you're saying, and it made me think. And I'm just putting this out there, but maybe that's a struggle because people aren't fully committed. It's like a 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Like, I'm just gonna try
Yes.
this thing, and like I'm not gonna be fully, because that's just society on the whole. Like, people aren't, they're so terrified of being fully committed to something and fully immersed in something. And unfortunately, when you're not fully committed to something, it's very hard to see any form of growth because you're not fully into it. And I think that's one of the biggest things in relationships is like, it's literally a 1 foot out. So I guess the cop out is if it doesn't work out. I don't know if people are protecting themselves. I don't know what's going on, but people aren't fully into the things that they do on all aspects of their life, especially relationships, you know?
I think people are so busy because everything is on show now. Okay. So people are looking at what others have. And so they're looking at, I don't have this, I don't have that. My husband can't provide this. So any man that therefore comes by and says, hey, and dangles the carrot, she's gone, because she hasn't taken a decision to say, listen, we're going to tough it out. We're going to see how we can pull together and make this work. What people don't realize with marriage is that, and I've seen it time and time again, you have one, okay, one person with a vision. When you put two persons on one vision, it happens in twice the speed. And that is why when people sometimes get married, you see they're able to buy a house and they have one car, and the next thing you know, they have two cars, and then they have children and they're able to afford the school fees, and they're able to afford moving into a bigger house eventually, because they have a shared vision and they grow that vision together, nourished by love. But some of that, and that sounds old fashioned, I know, but I tell you, I've seen people materialize scenarios just because two heads come together, focused on one vision, and they make it happen. So that's what I want to encourage people still to look at how you can put your heads together and grow yourselves together instead of just looking for a ready-made man or a ready-made woman.
Well, um, I don't know how much of this concept of looking for a ready-made man is really applicable to us, because the truth is the vast majority of women are, putting their NHT together with their men. They are starting businesses with men. They're going 50-50. The reality on the ground of the black man and the black woman is that we've never had the luxury of waiting around for a millionaire provider. We've had to, if you go to Coronation Market now, a lot of the stores, a lot of the vendors, these are couples who come together and build together. So
Yes.
that is just the reality. Outside of what is being foisted upon us by media, that black women are gold diggers or we're looking for a ready-made man, that has never been the black woman's reality, because we don't have that luxury.
Right.
So that's one thing. Or I know that black women are very much willing, able, and have been
Mm-hmm.
um, building and struggling with their men. But one of the beautiful things of UNIA and Marcus Garvey, which we often forget, one of the reasons why Garvey was so successful at organizing was one word: incentive. When he was able to communicate to African people that, look, you are suffering everywhere on this globe. Imagine if you had shares in this. Imagine if you're able to build your paradise in Africa. And that is how we got them on board. But part of what is needed is vision and long-term vision. So we have to create organizations and movements and podcasts like this one, which are going to give people, young people, an incentive to want to work together. Because currently, the incentive that's being sold to them, as Farai said earlier, is cats and singlehood and lattes. So we have to offer an alternative reality. We have to think in terms of 50 years down the line, what kind of reality we hope to see. But it can't just be, you know, let's just get married for the sake of it. We have to give people tangible and attractive reasons for why they need to invest in themselves, invest in the preservation of the Black family.
Yes. Agreed.
Reality. No, them talking, I don't know, regular everyday talking. I feel like them discussion are where this is like an extension of what I think a conversation supposed to be between a man and a woman. I call it what it is really. Because the
Yes.
concept of vision is something I think which is affecting the whole society. I will think about it from a microscopic level, and I will break it down and realize that are the missing ingredient where I take place currently. Nobody has a vision of where they want to reach, and then not just the vision, make reason out the vision and see how we can get towards the destination, and then along that lines, there's going to be a process filled with as a tough gangster. Life is one big road filled with a lot of signs and all of these different things. We have to come in between and try to stop you along the journey, and then that's when you have to really sit down and say to yourselves, say, me have to think about the next way to get this together. But then guess what now? It's not just you alone have to sit down and think about how you're going to get to that particular place. You have a partner now who can come strengthen the vision even more now and reassure you again to when time you feel like you get weary. So there's a whole thing surrounded by this vision where I think a lot of people need to pay attention to very, very keenly. And I don't think me personally think I could be wrong. I don't think everybody born are blessed with that gift of vision, and that is where I think there's a whole gap going on right now. And a lot of people who never get blessed with that vision are trying to assume roles of visionaries, and that is causing a problem.
Very true. Going back to what Julia said earlier about concept of leadership, we have to have vision, and we have to have the understanding that much of the change we want to see, we won't see in our lifetime. We have to be willing to put in the work for our children to come.
Generations.
You know,
Hmm.
some of us, because of individualism, again, we're only concerned with immediate gratification. What's going to happen in 5 years? What's going to happen for me and my wife? We need to be able to put the wheels in motion so that our great grandchildren will benefit from the work that we did.
Yes, agreed.
I'm not sure if anyone wants to add something else or elaborate on a particular part. Or
You
you good?
always have a part two of the reason, cause you know it goes evolution, you know, so it need purpose.
All right.
I
So
think it's a beautiful conversation that we've started. We're planting the seeds for the young listeners to start to question even themselves and their trajectory in life and how they hope to pursue relationships with the opposite sex going forward. You know, it's a very important conversation. This is not a conversation that they would normally be able to have or hear from the different sides in a less in a non-combative um scenario or setting, you know, where there's objective views being shared that gets everyone thinking. And so I think perhaps what the persons who are here on this live should be doing is typing into the comment section how they would like to see the part two evolve to help them to be able to understand how they should proceed. Because coming out of this, perhaps we might be able to seed a whole new um, vision for relationships, especially among people of color, where there has been some sort of breakdown or there we're currently in transition as we, you know, go backwards to come to move forward. You know, so yeah.
Well, I keep going back to what Junior said about the concept of leadership because I feel like it's so important. And one of the things that was displayed tonight, a leader just doesn't simply instruct others on what to do and how to be. A leader leads by inspiration, by inspiring others with the way he or she conducts their own life. And I am very grateful for this platform that I Never Knew TV has created and the way that the brothers conduct themselves, the way that they always make an effort to include women, not just women who agree with their point of view, but women who also have alternative views. And very rarely on YouTube do you see a panel talking about the gender issues where it doesn't get rude, it doesn't get nasty, it doesn't get disrespectful. And I think it's a testimony to the divine masculine that we have in or amongst our men.
Yes.
And sometimes it's simply a matter of tuning out, tuning out the other and focusing on the good that exists so that we can have more of that good. So I'm grateful for this opportunity. I definitely think we need a part two. I think there's a lot of things that we could have touched on. There's a whole heap of things I wanted to say. And we definitely need a part two. So I'm grateful and I hope that we will have this opportunity again.
no, a serious thing, and we give thanks for we give thanks for the wisdom and the time from Paula, and we give thanks for the wisdom and the time from Keisha. Far I always give thanks for the strength to stay away, and I appreciate everyone who tuned in and listened, who was going to tune in. Hopefully, really, not just listen, but actually really taking this information and try to apply it that you can improve yourself, because a lot of game was given out in this reason and a lot of stuff that's applicable, and I think that's what's missing the most, and that's why I'm very pleased with the reason in regards to everyone provided something that someone can apply to their situation to improve themselves. So I think we were very successful. That was the key mission, and I think we were very successful in that. I give thanks for everyone sharing their wisdom. So all right, so we give thanks anyway.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye,
Thanks,
everyone.
guys.
Take care.